One of the nicest things about the internet and eBay is that when you want more information on something, you can usually find it, and it's even better, you can go online and quite cheaply you can buy things like this RFID access system, and it's a cheap system. It's not a very sophisticated, it's really not a very secure system, but it's good for just learning because you can open it up, see how things work. You can get some of the packs of cheap tags with it and you can open them up and see what's in them. And I had a sudden crash course in RFID when my mother was developing Alzheimer's, and she was going these long walks, and because she was scared about locking herself out, she kept jamming the door open, and this was a security issue, and it was also the heat was all blowing out the house and the heating was just running all the time while she was doing it. And by putting an RFID system in, it meant she didn't have to worry about keys, and we put an automatic spring-loaded door closer on, and it meant that, you know, the place was much more secure. But it seemed so simple at the time, you know, my mum would have an RFID tag and it would detect her approaching the door and the door would unlock. But it doesn't work like that. The long-range RFID is complex. It requires much more specialist equipment. So I'll show you this, and I'll show you some other bits and pieces. I was hoping to show you, I'll probably do another video covering the Weiland protocol units, but I'll show you one of them. But I'll cover that in another video because it's a modestly complex, and I'll even try and get the big unit that we used at my mother's house when she was still mobile and going her walks, because it's quite interesting in its own right. Although it's much like this unit here, it's all sealed in resin. They all tend to be sealed in resin because they're designed to brave the elements. However, looking at this unit, this is a cheap unit. It's actually worth buying one just to play with because it's quite fun, and then you realise that people are using these on doors and you think, well, that's not very secure, because this is just a cheap generic one, and all the contacts are in here, the ones that actually physically open the door, and that's not necessarily good, because it means that if you can get this off the wall in any way, or reset it, or they don't change codes because once you get to know it, you think, oh, I don't think I'd use that. But if you can get off the wall, you can short contacts, you can reset it, you can do various things, and some of them have security switches in them, and this one just doesn't. So if you do take the screw out and then prise it off the wall, which I will say is quite difficult because you have to get hooked right under it, but that, the security guys have a way of taking it off the wall, I'm sure. I think I'd probably just slip something under and hook it off. But with the ones with the switch, if you took that off, it would trip a panic, a tamper alarm. But having said that, many of them don't have, it depends even if that tamper circuit's wired into it. However, let's take a look at this unit and compare it to something like this, which is just a bare, this is a dumb transmitter. This does not have any intelligence. If you could rip this off the wall, all you've got access to is power and data, and no facility to control the system. I mean, I suppose really, if you were really, you want to take a risk that it might work, you could do something. You could inject power back down either short out the power supply, or with the hope that it might initialize. I noticed with one of the other units that while it was initializing, it would energize the relay briefly, and I suppose there are weaknesses with everything, that you could maybe just short out the power and it would possibly even kill a magnetic lock. If you did that, it might, just render the whole system useless. Who knows? It's just always interesting, the possibilities. Anyway, getting back to this unit, and this unit comes with the option of either typing a code, and it comes, and here's another weakness, with a default code, 8888 hash, and that unlocks it. I wonder how many of these are installed with the default code left in, because that's the master code. There's also a programming code, which is you press star 1688 and that enters a programming mode, and the green light stays on. You can do various programming functions, including changing all the codes and resetting it. So you can also change the mode. It can either be password only, and you can give lots of people different passwords, so I suppose you just type random numbers, you're going to get lucky at some point. Or you can make it so it responds to a tag, This one is not programmed, so it's not lighting the green light with this one, it's just making that sort of double beep. And you can make it also so that you have to use your tag and a password, which is more secure. Another thing to look for if you go up to these things, you'll see that, you know, some of them, I bet some of you watching this video who have cash cards with the chip and pin have the passcode. Your pin code is 1234. It's the most common pin code. And quite often you'll find keypads like this with, you know, either dirty fingerprints 1234, or that'll be the bit that's worn completely off the keyboard 1234, and you go and you type 1234 and oh, you're in. So yeah, not very secure. However, let's program one of these tags into it, and I'll show you another little interesting weakness with these tags. So to program it, I'm going to press the star, enter the programming 1688, enter. And to program this tag in, I'm going to select menu option 1. 1, and it's now flickering the green LED, and I put this up, and that's it programmed. And you can continue programming cards, but now, once I exit this, when I present this fob, it will activate the relay and it will unlock the door. However, it's a bit of a weakness with these because, say for instance this orange one, which is the wrong code, and it won't open the door. Watch this. This is another eBay delight, and if I switch it on, and I hold it up to this tag, and I'll keep it away from that unit because that unit's emitting quite a lot of energy. Actually, tell you what, let's just shove that over there then. He said shorting it out on something behind his bench. Okay. So I hold this up to the front of this, and I press read. And it makes a double beep. Then I hold this writable tag up, and I press write. And it double beeps again. Now, back to this unit. So this is the one that works, and this will light the green light to let you in. Now, having just sniffed someone else's tag and programmed your own, this opens the door too. So not very secure at all. The inside of these, the way this works, it's basically a loop of wire. It's a very fine wound loop of wire, and it transmits, basically speaking, a sort of electrical field. In this case it's 125 kilohertz, 125,000 cycles a second. And I can let you see this field and how strong it is because I got a bit of card and I just wound a coil on it with very fine wire, and I put in 2 LEDs wired in inverse parallel. So one point LED with one polarity, one with the other polarity, and they're just tacked across that coil. Watch this. When I bring this up to the reader, see them lighting up? It's maybe not showing the camera as well as I see it, but I'm seeing these green LEDs lighting very brightly. They start glowing around about 2 inches from the unit and then get brighter as you get closer to it. And the way this unit works, it induces that field in a coil, and here's one of these little key fobs opened. I'll tell you what, let's get the notepad. So I'll just slide this out the way here. I'm trying not to short those wires against anything. Inside this fob is a little circuit board, and it's got sort of 3 pads in it. The middle pad has a little chip mounted on it, and then it's covered in resin after a couple of bond wires are tacked onto the adjacent pads. And then a coil of wire, a fine coil, multiple of turns, not sure how many turns, it's very fine wire. And I think the number of turns can vary. I'm not sure how critical that is, but the finer it is and the larger I'm guessing you do get more sensitive cards and they've got a much thicker coil. I don't know if it's just thicker wire or it's more turns. There's a good chance it's more turns. But anyway, the one end of the coil is brought to that pad, one end is brought to that pad. And what actually happens, when you bring this tag up to the reader, it induces a magnetic field into the coil, and then you get the current flow, and that's enough to power this chip. And the chip then relays data. As soon as it's powered, all the chip does is it sends its code out, and the way it does that is it shunts that coil. Not complete dead short, because it still needs power to operate, but it attenuates the coil the pulsed binary data. And the transmitter unit can detect that the signal it's putting out is being modulated by that pulsed data, and that's how it detects the code. And you get the short range and you get the long range cards. I mean, here's a thin card. That's the standard. This isn't programmed into the unit at the moment, so it won't accept it. And you get the thicker cards. This was the long range, and this is what I ended up using. Well, you can hear it's just triggering as soon as I go anywhere near the unit. This card triggers it, but it still wasn't good enough. Yeah, that's almost a bit annoying now. But this card is visibly thicker, and hold on, I'm going to get a torch and shine it through it. Oh, I don't need to get a torch and shine it through it, actually. I don't need a torch at all because I opened one earlier. Yeah, God, it's so sensitive to that. Inside the thicker card is the loose coil and the chip. The whole lot is loose, in fact. Can I oh, yes, I can. Okay, that's what we've got. The wire is wound round a former and then it's bonded together with a glue, so it is quite coherent. And there's the little chip there, and this is the long range one that just seems to be a much larger mass of wire. This card here is, this card, right, okay. This card is just a little round antenna in there and very flat with the chip over here. In fact, you know what, I'm just going to draw on this card right now what's inside it. The coil is there, and it's not very thick. It really is about that thick at most. And then the little chip is just over there, and obviously the wires are just going across, and that's it. That means it really is much, it's a much smaller, flatter, thinner coil. This one must have more turns, as you can hear from it. It just activates that thing all the time. In the case of my mother's situation, where we wanted super long range, we actually had to get what was called a Weiland 26 transmitter, which is one of these sealed units, but it was a dedicated unit that was for long range, and it was massive. I ended up buying lots and lots of stuff off eBay in the hope that I would get something that, you know, went together, because this on its own won't work. When I first bought the RFID unit, I then did some research and thought, oh, that's not actually going to even unlock the door or anything like that. I then had to get a keypad that accepted the Weiland protocol. I don't think this one does. Although if this one's got a dedicated chip, it might even have that facility on the chip but not used. I'm not 100% sure if that's just a microcontroller on that one, or a dedicated chip. I'd say compared to, I'll open this one afterwards, but this one has tons of circuitry in it. This one has a lot of chips and support circuitry compared to this one, which is, I think, the newer model. But to do the long range thing, I needed the reader that basically just sends the code, and then I needed a remote keypad, which we've just mounted indoors, and it received the code, and then I just, I was just cobbling things together. I put a relay on it, and just a plug-in power supply. It was just cobbled together to get it going, and it worked a treat. It really had a long range, but it was interesting that when you powered the long range unit up, you had to do it with the door in its closed position, where it was going to be doing its detecting, because if you didn't, if you powered it up with the door open, it calibrates at the startup to the local surrounding fields and sort of averages everything out and then just locks it. And if you did it while it was open and then let the door close, it reduced its range dramatically because it had calibrated to the different position. Now, if you're actually, the reason I've got a poker chip here is because the casinos embed these coils into their poker chips for security reasons. I'm not going to say that all casinos do it. I've never actually tried an RF reader. There are lots of different standards. I'd guess they'd use a much higher security one, particularly given that a poker chip usually has an extremely high value and justifies it. But it means that they can, on the table, without, if people put a stack or if people put a chip down, they can actually put it on the table and surreptitiously it'll warn them if it's either a fake chip with no RFID tag in it, or if it's a stolen chip, because they can actually log stolen chips, the numbers, and detect them when they're used in their casinos. All very interesting casinos. They're just a world of their own, criminal run usually, but quite technically interesting. I like casinos. I like the technology. I don't like gambling. I do like the technology in casinos. It's crime done in style. So when you use something like this thing here has a little relay in it, and it can be, you know, it can switch a modest load. I wouldn't say it's going to be really major because it really is a tiny little. It's this little relay here. It's not big at all. And interestingly, you can choose normally open or normally closed contact with this little jumper, and all it's doing is the lead that's going over to the terminal block, it's switching it between the normally open or normally closed contact. It's not changing anything other than the fact that the relay just energizes when it gets a valid card, and all it's doing is determining which contact's connected. You've also got a facility for a switch to be put across this, and if you bridge that, let me bridge this with something. Let me find a pair of long nose pliers. I'm hoping this is the right contacts. Yeah, it's activated the relay inside. It's, you know, all it does is it bypasses everything, and that's for the exit button inside, so that people can push the button and it unlocks the door. It's also got doorbell contacts, and all that those are just bare contacts. It's a volt-free circuit as far as I can see, with just this little button under here, just bridges that out so it sounds a buzzer or bell inside. So, you know, it's not rated a high current, it's just a little membrane, not a membrane switch, but the little clicky switch, the tactile switch. So the weaknesses, one of the weaknesses with some of the other units, and I noticed this one doesn't have it, which is quite good, is that you can reset the defaults. So that code I showed you earlier on, 1688 or 8888 for opening the door, that's the default code, and it used to be that if you just reset these pins and, you know, shorted them out, it would reset it. But this one, it appears that you need to turn the power on to, you know, short them, put a link across it, turn the power on, and then remove the link, or just, well, I'm guessing that would be the easiest way to do it. Probably take this link here, pop it over, turn the power off. I've just done that. Turn the power on, and that would be at reset. And I don't think it actually removes the codes. Hold on. No, it doesn't remove the codes. All it does is it restores the security passwords and things like that. You can delete all the codes in these, or you can delete them selectively. You can either hold the tag up to it in the delete mode, or you can just delete them all. But yeah, the chip is a Nuvoton W78E052. Is that an O or a D? DDG. So W78E052DDG. I'm not sure if that's a dedicated chip. The number under it is 528GG2518390-142SA. I should have researched that chip before I did this. Oh, not to worry. I'll probably go into the circuit. Oh, let's open this further. Let's take it completely to bits, in fact. So you can see the coil around the outside that is used to actually communicate with the cards. So I'm going to be careful not to, the wires from that are just tacked onto the edge of the board here. I don't see, you know, compare this board to this one, you know, it's just chalk and cheese. This one's stuffed with, you know, circuitry. But maybe the back of this one's covered in circuitry, I'm not 100% sure. So I'll hinge this open carefully rather than knack that coil, or I can always connect it again. I'll move this in to remind me to actually show you what's inside that as well. It's another component of this. So when you open it up, there's really not a lot of circuitry in the back of that. There's that chip there, which is a 4069. That's a standard CMOS chip. I think, is that not an inverter or buffer? Not 100% sure. 4069, is that? Is it? I'm not 100% sure, I'd have to check that as well. It's got little, what looks like a regulator. It's got the buttons here. That does look like it's just connected. In fact, those two buttons look as though they're in parallel for the doorbell, so that if, you know, whichever one of these you pressed, it would just common the, you know, it would just ring the bell indoors. And really, that's, you know, there's not an awful lot in this. It really is sparse. I don't see an awful lot round here either. Unless the chip is a dedicated RFID chip, and it's got a lot of the circuitry on board, because maybe that's actually part of that. Maybe the CMOS chip is being used to analyse compare the signal come back or look for differences. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to check what that chip is. But yeah, there's not really an awful lot inside. But from the front of this, it looks as though it's designed for other functionality. It looks as though it's designed to have like LED positions here, and as if maybe it's got different codes. And I'm not really sure. Certainly this one, you can see that it's got the 3 LEDs in this, well 2. It's got 3 LED positions, but only 2 appear to be occupied. And the rest are all just, it looks as though it's designed to be used for different functions. Maybe alarm systems. Not sure, maybe it is also used as alarms. It's the mode one, doesn't have a LED. It's got that marked as mode, and it's got the hole, but it's not got an LED. So going on to this unit here then, before I forget about it. This is a generic Chinesey power supply for CCTV systems. And what it does is it's got a switch mode power supply based on this cramped circuitry here, and this switch mode chip, which does appear to have modest filtering. No earth. It's got a pad here that connects the earth via that screw, but it's not connected. But could be connected. I think if I was screwing this into a case, I'd want it to be earthed, unless you used it in an earth metal enclosure, but I'm sure lots of people just have these screwed to the wall. But this thing, basically it's a switch mode power supply, puts out a beefier 12 volt supply for things like locks and stuff like that, and for powering the keypads. And then it accepts the signals back for the door pushes or the sort of control signals from these. But this doesn't do any decoding itself, it takes a signal back and then operates the lock for X amount of time. And you've got a little potentiometer down here that you can stick a screwdriver in to tweak to adjust the timing of that, and a slightly beefier relay. Songo relay. Songo, they turn up a lot in Chinese stuff. It seems to just be a very common relay. I don't think that's a Songo relay. No, it's not. But yes, RFID tags, they're all very interesting stuff, but as I say, with gadgets like that, not 100% secure. I did sneakily take this onto a job I go on, where I wanted to see how secure the system was, and it would not read my card. I'll obviously have to go on eBay and buy some other ones to see if I can actually do that. But yes, that was... It's interesting stuff, and as I say, it's cheap. If you want to learn how to use it and so on, just buy some and then play with it. It's just toys for technical people like us. But yeah, good stuff, good fun to play with.